How do you convert getting into photography? How do you get into film?
Right, that was my next question. You're right.
Do you know how to do it?
I don't even know how you get into photography, so how do you get into film?
Do you recognize these movies? Have you ever watched a movie and thought to yourself, I wish I could actually create something just like that? Or maybe you just think to yourself, how do I even get into making movies and films? Well, if that's you, this is the YouTube video for you. Today, I got to sit down with Stephen Hall and actually go through how he went from photographer to director and got on the films just like these ones and helped create them.
Right, well, let's dive into it. Okay, so I've got a list of questions here.
Good.
We'll go on the first one. So, first of all, thanks for joining us. And let's dive straight into it. Can you tell us a bit about your early life and from that, how that sparked an interest in film, how that kind of came about?
Wow, that's a great question. My early life was started in 1959. So I saw the tail end of the 50s. Fortunately, sound had been invented in movies by then.
When did sound come into movies?
So early, late 20s. Before that, it was all about playing a piano.
What do they call it? It was there was a name for it, wasn't there?
Silent?
Silent pictures. Silent pictures. There you go.
Silent movies. So yes, 1959, I entered this world, and at the time there was I might be wrong here. You need to check me. There was only 2 channels on the TV, the BBC and the independent channels. There was only 2 channels. Okay. So instead of watching TV, you go to the cinema a lot. Obviously, there was no catch-up, there was no internet, there was nothing. And in the mid to late 60s, I spent a lot of time in my local cinema in East London, where I was born.
Okay.
And there was also a thing called Saturday Morning Pictures.
What?
Which was a cinema club for young people.
Okay.
Kids. You know, in those days, your parents would happily let you out of the house at 5 or 6, jump on a bus and go to cinema on your own.
5 a.m.?
No, 5 or 6 years old.
Oh, right, 5 or 6 years old.
So every Saturday morning, they'd have this cinema club and you would get a mixture of cartoons. It was, for many years, the only place you could see a Looney Tune cartoon, any sort of Disney cartoon. There would then be like a serial, like an episodic serial, a children's adventure, mostly a British thing, Children's Film Foundation. Okay. And then at the end of it, you'd have the feature. This was the thing you were all waiting for. It was a movie. Invariably aimed towards children, and invariably it would be called something akin to a B movie. That is not a Hollywood blockbuster, but something, you know, something pretty cool because you hadn't seen it before.
Give me an example. I'm trying to imagine what that would be.
Okay.
I'm thinking like Lassie, but...
Yeah, well, you would see that possibly as the serial.
Okay.
But then there would be a film that would be shown as a kind of 60, 70-minute feature film. And it would be about kids doing wonderful things, gangs, not in the modern sense of that word.
Famous Five kind of thing.
Exactly that, Jim.
Right.
Exactly
I've got
that.
you. I've got you.
And that kind of sparked an interest in cinema for me. When I was about 10, and this is a short story I'll tell, I went to see a movie called Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which was a Disney movie.
It sounds like it's going to be something completely different nowadays. It sounds like you follow OnlyFans.
I love when I'm on set, and I've been on set for 37 years working in the industry, and I love when people say, what's your favourite film? There's always this sort of little bit of one-upmanship of saying some obscure Japanese movie. Right. But I quite like Bedknobs and Broomsticks as my favourite film. And it cemented my interest in what has now become visual effects.
So that was that was big at the time for visual effects?
It was huge. Yeah.
Okay.
It was groundbreaking.
Well, that kind of gets to the next question in one go, because was there a specific moment or film that made you realise you wanted to become a director, DOP, that kind of thing?
Probably subconsciously, probably subliminally. When I sat with my dad, I think I went with my dad to see Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and I remember leaving that cinema, and I'm kind of slightly making this up now, because don't forget, when I was 10, that was 55 years ago. It's quite a long time ago.
Wow.
And I remember I talked about nothing else probably for a week. I thought about nothing else for a week because it was hugely influential. I thought it was amazing. I have actually watched the film many times since.
Yeah.
And okay, so the effects are a little clunky and you can see the early days of blue screen work quite clearly, but it's still quite magical.
The thing is, like, I'm thinking of you as a film director, as DOP, these kind of roles.
Yeah.
And, you know, actually your background in this, because the basis of this interview is really to go out, and I said this in my last one, it's really to go out to my kids and their friends and that kind of stuff and talk about, you know, how do you become this? So the last one was how do you become a sports presenter?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's just interesting because people are interested in how do you become something? And I'm listening to your story, there's a really solid grounding in photography before you've even got into film.
Yeah,
and learning about f-stops, learning about all these kind of, how does the camera work, right? Which is key. And I mean, I don't even know what happens now with digital cameras and stuff, with people looking at, you know, whatever they're called.
I don't even switch it on now. Someone else presses that button.
Well, like, so you've got an assistant of an assistant. You're calling over.
Oh, five people on a camera. So
5 people pressing the button.
Well, one person pressing the button.
I'm joking.
Of course. But it's quite interesting though, because you're right. And in about 19, whatever it was, and I've got to get my dates right here. And of course, as the older you get, the dates become a little blur.
That's okay.
But I think it must have been in about, I don't know when it was, but it was mid-80s, maybe early 80s, I think, maybe even late 70s. I was working on large format stills photography. This is going to be news to all the people watching this who don't know anything about photography. But there used to be a format called 10 by 8. So the negative, the thing you expose onto,
It's much bigger.
10 by 8 inches.
Wow.
Like almost A4.
So I'm just converting that into centimetres, like 30 by...
Yeah, well, it's nearly 298 by 210. It's big.
It's big.
It's big. And you would use that because the possibility of blowing that up to a massive poster you see in the street, or as it was in the day, Piccadilly Circus or somewhere like that, you'd be able to blow it up enormously.
Okay, because
only if you had that size negative.
It's like having more megapixels.
It's like having exactly that. It's like having that. So you become au fait specialist, if you like, in using a plate camera, which is a thing with bellows in the middle. It's like the old traditional thing you see where someone chucks a black cloth over their head, smile, bang, there's the picture.
And that's what you were using late
I was
70s.
the assistant that knew all about how those cameras worked. And we got a call one day, or I got a call one day to go and help a photographer who was working at Elstree Studios in North London.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, great, okay, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I know 10 by 8. He didn't know 10 by 8 at all. And he was working on this movie. And he needed to do a specific shot on 10 by 8. So he said, would you come and help me? So I said, yeah. So off I went. I got to Elstree Studios and we set up the camera in stage 5 at Elstree Studios. I remember it distinctly because it was another pivotal moment. And we took this picture. And in that picture was an actor called Jack Nicholson, and the movie was called The Shining. And in The Shining...
Hang on a second.
There is a moment...
Hang on a second. You worked on The Shining?
Yeah, only for, you know...
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
That is in Told for only about...
That is a film.
Only about a week in Told. Maybe, I can't even remember, 10 days or something, because we did it a few times. It's a Stanley Kubrick movie, of course. And I didn't know who Stanley Kubrick was at that point. Because...
Was he on set when you went there?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. He's just a guy walking around with a big old thick coat on and a massive great bushy beard. And I just thought, who's that bloke?
Well, he's a bit scruffy.
He is a little scruffy. So that was my introduction to, that's the first film set I ever went on.
That's amazing.
Well, it was quite an interesting eye-opener, because what I thought photography was cool.
Yeah.
But then what I thought, whoa, movies are way cooler.
And you were like, so, yeah. And
so how do you convert, having struggled to get into photography?
Yes.
How do you convert getting into photography?
Yes.
How do you get into film?
Right, that was my next question. You're right.
Do you know how to do it?
I don't even know how you get into photography, so how do you get into film?
Well, at the time, of course, it was heavily unionised in the UK, and I couldn't get a union ticket because I didn't work in film, Catch-22. To work in film, I had to know some people who worked in film.
What?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's true, there's a clothes shop in those days. And what I did...
And were they highly protective because they were once you're in it, you don't want anybody else in?
Incredibly so. Right. So what I did was the only way I could get a job working in film was to drive a thing called a Winnebago, which is a massive American motorhome.
In the UK or in the US?
In the UK.
Right.
film companies, a lot of commercial companies, and the odd movie would rent these.
Yeah.
So then actors can sit in them.
Yeah.
Producers can do whatever producers do in them, sometimes unsavory stuff.
Right.
And they would need a driver to drive it from set to wherever. And I got a job driving those.
And that was your break into film.
It was my break into film.
You were on the set of The Shining. You were like,
Well, it didn't happen quite overnight.
You were like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then you were like, how do I get into this? You then spent time working out how to get into it. You realised it was a closed shop.
Sure.
And you were like, right, how am I going to do it? And you saw this little niche.
Well, there was an
this
ad
little
actually
gap.
in one of the photographic magazines, because what they also did, they drove these same motorhomes for big still shoots.
Right.
So
Because in those days, the big still shoots were a lot
they
of
were
people.
big and they were manual,
Right.
and they needed somewhere for models to change. And it's all changed since then, of course.
Yeah.
But at the time, and so what I did was I drove these things for about 18 months and met people, and also emptied the poo of some pretty influential people.
Well, that's very important.
Which is very important.
Yeah.
And I thought this is quite cool. I actually quite enjoyed it as well, because it was funky.
Not the poo bit, the driving.
It wasn't that bad. So what I did was I chatted to people and said, okay, so how do I get into your department? I talked to the camera department, who I'd wander around on set.
Yeah.
And it's all changed since then, of course.
But I don't know if it has, because I think this is actually a key moment in this, right? Is that the thing that I say, well, to my kids, to the team, everybody, is that be curious. Right, because if you want to go and do something, right, the key is actually just asking questions. And I don't think there's any difference then to now, because it's about, if you get an opportunity to be somewhere, so you've made this opportunity for yourself, you're in the Winnebago, you're with these people, so you're saying, well, how do I get into your department? How do I get into, I don't think that's changed to today.
I think you're right. I think that's good advice.
It's about being curious.
I said to my boys, and I'll come on to those, I have 3 boys, and I said to them, just be confident. Be nice to people and be confident. If you're confident, people will engage with you.
Right.
If you kind of mumble and shuffle your feet, they're never going to do it.
Exactly.
So that's what
That's a hard lesson to learn, especially when you're young.
Yeah, of course. It is. You've got a load of stuff going on in your mind. Don't forget, there's still all those girls you've got to chase and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Football's gone.
But I remember being that age, and then meeting the first MD or sales director when you the first kind of company, and these guys they're on like pedestals. Now I look at it and they're just human beings. But in those days, it's quite hard to be confident. And so I think the thing is about, can you be curious? Can you ask a couple of questions? Can you, and that's a good question. How do I get into that department? And ultimately, people like to talk. If you're asking for their advice, they want to tell you. So if you just ask a question and learn to shut up, they're going to tell you.
I think it's all about projecting yourself as well. It's all about having, as you say, to succeed in anything, you've got to have a passion.
Yeah.
And that passion has to be to succeed primarily, but also to succeed in a field that you're passionate about. Yes. You are passionate about. Yes. What happened then after The Shining, after driving Winnebago for 18 months or so, or however long it was, probably longer, I don't know, I can't remember now. I thought, okay, so it's film, I want to make a job in film. And also at the time I was working on big stills photography still as an assistant. So what I was doing, I was being on car shoots. And I remember distinctly next door to one of the car shoots I was doing was a commercial being shot on a different stage. And I wandered in there and thought, no, this is it. This is where I want to be. I want to be here. So I actually got chatting to someone who was working in that camera department. They said, well, look, if you be a camera trainee. I thought, okay, great, I'm in. And there it was.
And so, and that's the move, and
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Got a job as a camera trainee, and then in the camera department there are like 5 or 6 people on a camera. Yeah. So you kind of work your way up the grades from camera trainee, running around getting teas and coffees and stuff, and doing a bit of paperwork, and then you do the clapper loading, putting a clapper board on, and then you do the focus pulling, first AC. So that is someone whose absolute prime responsibility is keeping you sharp.
So when I was researching this, it's actually answered a question for me, because when I went onto your IMBD, is that what it's called? IMBD? And so I went onto the IMBD. I find that quite hard because I'm dyslexic, so I keep calling it IMDb.
It's all right. That's probably something else.
So I was going, and then there's a lot, there's always saying that you focus pillar, it's going, and I was like, what is a focus pillar, right? And that doesn't exist anymore, does it? A focus pillar? Does a focus pillar still exist?
Well, they call it a first AC, a first assistant cameraman now, because we've inherited that title from our friends across the Atlantic.
Okay, but similar
But
job.
it used to be called a focus pillar. It's exactly the same job.
And it's not motorised or automatic, you still do it by hand?
You still do it by hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
A lot of people...
So on these big sets, there's somebody there who is constantly.
Literally cranking a knob that turns the lens, the focus ring on the lens, and moves it whenever someone moves.
I'm
Now,
blown
what
away.
they may be doing now, of course, it's wireless. When
Right.
I did it, that device that you
Was attached to the
turned
camera.
was attached to the camera. Now it's wireless. In fact, when I was a focus puller, I remember the tape measure being invented, and thinking this will change the world. So,
Out of the whole career, what would you say you felt was your biggest achievement? Out of all, you know,
that's really, I think they're all kind of equal in a way, but the biggest achievement, I guess, is getting in the industry, because at the time it was impossible. And of course, there were people through nepotism who could walk in because their dad worked in it. But don't forget, there were people in the docks that got jobs on the docks because their dad was on the docks. My dad worked at the Daily Express, and I was expected to follow him into the print, as it was called in those days. But I didn't. My grandfather also worked at the Daily Express, so there was this father-son thing.
Yeah.
Fleet Street was full of father-sons working in the business, but as were the docks. And both of those industries, by the way, are long gone. So,
And film is still here.
and film is still.
Film is still here.
So yeah. So then, as a camera operator, I then started doing stuff. So I did a movie called Star Wars: The Phantom Menace as a first AC.
And that's interesting because that was the first one that Lucas did, but years after.
Yeah, it was what's called a prequel.
Yeah.
So it was episode 1.
Of the
We had already
6
seen, of
episodes.
course, episodes 4, 5, and 6. Yeah. In fact, when I went for the interview, and I don't mind if the producer that interviewed me was watching this, because he said, of course, you know, I said, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I actually wasn't at all. I had no idea who the characters were, and I sort of bullshitted my way through the interview. And I kind of made a mistake because I didn't realise that Ewan McGregor was playing the character he was.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I thought he was playing the son.
Okay, so which of the films that you've been involved with would you say you're most proud of then?
Gladiator probably was my favourite film to work on.
And what did you? I already know the answer to this, but I love it. What did you? There's a specific part that you filmed, right, within Gladiator.
No, I worked on the whole movie.
You worked on the whole movie, but
I was a visual effects DOP, so I did lots of the big visual effects shots. The whole
in
of
the Colosseum.
The whole of the Germania battle at the start of the movie is
amazing.
Is main unit as well, and the second unit, and the visual effects unit is like huge. This is big for the UK.
Yeah.
100 and so horsemen, that's massive for the UK. You'd shoot that in Prague now, or Romania or somewhere, but in 1990, I've got to get my dates right, in 1999, we shot it in Guildford.
I remember because I actually had some friends in Guildford College, and I don't know which person it is, the casting director went round Guildford College and basically asked all the lads if they'd like to be in a movie, and they were all the Roman soldiers.
Yeah, that would be the same people who froze for weeks on end.
Yeah, standing there in the cold.
Yeah, but then we did go to Morocco, and then we did go to Malta for quite a long time, two months in Malta, in the Colosseum.
And that's a film that stands the test of time. That is an amazing film.
The Gladiator 2 has just come out, of course, as
it's ruined
speaking.
Yeah, it's ruined it.
And I didn't get that job. I did actually go up for it as a second unit and didn't get it.
Right, interesting.
So
but that's probably why it's not as good.
No, but it's kind of interesting. I'd like to have done that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of groundbreaking for me. And I got Gladiator because I'd done Star Wars. I'd done those visual effects on Star Wars.
Right.
So I got Gladiator on that basis. And then I got The Mummy on the basis that I'd done Gladiator. And then I got The Mummy 2 because I'd done, and then I got 102 Dalmatians. And it's all about your CV is growing because people look at it and think, oh, he did this. So,
and then it becomes a little bit closed shop again because you can have this film because you've done that film.
Sure.
But you need to break into that
yeah,
first
other
film.
people can do it. But don't forget there are other people doing it. And,
Sure. But it becomes a smaller and smaller world.
A smaller and smaller world.
As the CV grows.
Yeah.
The other film that, you know, it's not... Our friend Jim Holland would say it's not very accurate, but I love it as a film, is Fury. Yeah,
so Fury was much later in my career. This was 2014, wasn't it? So I'm now quite established as a second unit director of photography. So second unit essentially is the unit they have that you get more time because you don't have as many people. I'd have typically about 70, 80 people on the crew, whereas the main unit would have, 120, 130, maybe even more. And actors.
Yeah.
So I would probably work with doubles. I'd probably work with stunt doubles. I'd probably do shots like 5 tanks going across the horizon, which sounds like a 3-second shot, which it is.
The setting up for
But
it.
to set that up, that's like half a day. This sounds ridiculous. It is something of an art because you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. What you're trying to do is be like a master forger.
Yep.
Whatever you shoot as a second unit has to match what the main unit are doing.
Yes.
So whatever the main unit DP is doing, and on that it was a very kind of crazy Russian DP who was a lovely guy, Roman, but totally crazy and ran around the camera all day.
When you say DP, director of
Director
photography.
of photography, sorry, that's I shortened it. So then you go on to the next job, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to mimic what they're doing. So then what I did, I thought, well, I'd quite like to direct. And what I didn't tell you, in 1991, I think it was, I actually directed a self-financed short film because I thought, I'm going to be a director.
Yeah.
So in 1991, I would have been 30-ish, 32 in fact.
Okay.
And I thought, great, I'll direct a short film. Alan Parker did it, directed a short film, became a very successful director. Alan Parker, one of the directors I really admire, sadly no longer with us. So I thought that's what I'll do. And I directed a short film, and I got a very good agent on the basis of that film. And then didn't work for a year. Literally, we became very poor, and I had to go back to being a film technician, and it kind of got put to one side. And I tried to get other projects going for many years afterwards, and it didn't happen. And then, of course, when the children came along, I thought, forget that.
Got to put that to one side.
So that's what I did. I forgot to tell you that bit. That's quite interesting because it's going to make a relevance now. Because now
that could have been.
If I'd have been better, more creative, if the film would have been better, perhaps.
I don't know if that's true.
Or if I'd just got a break.
Yeah, look, I think you know.
Or if my agent.
I think I listen to a podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is How I Built This with Guy Raz. I don't know if you've ever listened to that.
I kind of know, but it sounds interesting.
He does this brilliant thing where basically he takes very successful businesses and then he interviews them about how they made their business successful.
Okay.
And you know, it's all sorts of things, everyday kind of brands, all the way through to brands in the UK we might not have heard of, right? But it's really interesting to hear these entrepreneurs taking something from a startup all the way through to possibly selling it or where they are today.
Sure.
And one of the things he always asks at the end is, how much do you think is hard work and how much do you think is luck? And I would say 90% of all the guests are very humble and they turn around and they say, yes, it's a lot of hard work, but ultimately it's luck.
But I always think about luck. It's interesting. There's a bus coming down the road. There are two buses coming down the road. One has got opportunity on the thing on the front, its destination, and the other's got nothing.
Yeah.
As these buses come towards you, you jump on opportunity.
Yeah.
And you see where it goes. That's my take on it. You get on opportunity and you look at it. You take that opportunity. You don't sit there and say, whoa.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. That is making your own luck, but it's kind of training yourself to do that.
It's a mentality, I must admit.
And it's kind of training yourself to have the eyes open to spot when luck might be there.
Well, that's the other thing, of course, is recognizing an opportunity. And that sometimes, is not in your control, of course. But it's in your control to recognize it and think, yeah, I could do this. I'll take that.
Many young people dream of becoming directors. What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to do it today? So everything you now know about the current film industry.
I would say to get that phone out of your pocket.
Right.
Forget the 37 years and 50 movies that I've worked on to sit here today.
Yeah.
And go and make a movie.
On your phone?
On your phone.
Right.
You can edit it in Premiere quite easily.
Yeah.
You don't even need a real camera. You can use your phone. People have done it.
Yes.
Danny Boyle has just shot 28 decades later, whatever it is, pretty much on iPhone. That would be my advice. It's like people who say to me, be a DP, then great, go and shoot something. You can do it now. Don't forget, when I started doing it, you'd have to go and get some film, get a camera, send it off, get it processed, send them to cut it. Now, I could shoot a 90-minute movie today and I could distribute it around the world by, what would you say, 6 o'clock tonight?
Yeah.
7?
We could probably do it instantaneously if you weren't worried about the edit. The thing I hear a lot, nowadays you can get out and do this. And there's somebody, that we follow called Simon Squibb, he talks about this all the time. He's like, you can get out, you can just make a social channel, you can get your kind of thing out there. But I realised the other night that actually there's a wealth of experience in your mind, right, where it would allow you to frame something. It would allow you to take an iPhone and frame something and cut it in certain ways. And I think there's still something in that experience. You're saying, forget forget all the CVs, forget all the films you've been involved
totally.
in. But I don't think that's true.
I
because
personally
I think,
do, but,
well,
yeah.
I think I'm giving it a kind of slight devil's advocate in that I think there's probably a mix of it.
There is a mix of it. I mean,
would you say to kids that don't bother going to film school or this kind of thing, or would you?
Well, no, that's a different deal.
Right.
Because what going to film school gives you, it gives you access to agents, the necessary evil that agents are.
The necessary evil.
In my opinion. How do you get your agent to phone you? You phone their PA and tell them you've got a job. It's true. I know all the cliches, by the way. But I think as a creative, you've got a creative bent, a passion, a creative kind of bone in your body.
Yeah.
Then you can go and find a subject.
Yeah.
You can literally, it doesn't have to be on a phone, but it probably can be because it's the most easy device, isn't it? And they're brilliant now, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I just think there's something...
No, I agree, but I think
there's a combination of the two.
There probably is a combination of the two.
Possibly...
I'm doing that, 1 in 1,000 people who do that will make a living out of it.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, maybe more.
Yeah.
But I think it's good advice.
Yeah.
I think yes, there is a discipline. I see camera trainees now on movies that I work on, and I always say to them, don't be a trainee for too long.
Looking back, is there anything else you wish you had known when you first started your career?
I said to my son Harry, who started directing commercials quite young, actually. He was very young, and he went on his first commercial, which was in Cape Town, if I remember rightly. He's never directed a commercial before. He's now in Cape Town directing a big commercial for a very well-known soap brand.
Yeah.
And my advice to him was, be a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And also surround yourself with people who know what they're doing.
Yes.
And that was what he did. And I said, use their knowledge, not in a brutal stealing way, but in a collaborative way.
Yeah. Finally, what's next for you? And this is important for both of us.
Yeah, so we've already tipped off this. So about 2018, I found out about a project that was coming up, written by a chap called James Holland, a very successful best-selling author, basically a World War II expert, the leading expert of World War II in the world in terms of historians. And he had this project which kind of encompassed lots of things that I kind of like. World War II, a sense of purpose, a sense of patriotism, all those sort of things. And also it's basically the story is about an ordinary man who did extraordinary things. Don't forget the Second World War, ordinary people, fortunately, much younger than me, were forced to do extraordinary things. And for the most part, they volunteered for it because it was a patriotic duty that one undertook.
Yep.
So this story resonated with me. It had a lot of visual effects in it. It was action-based, so I'd done lots of action, done lots of visual effects, and I thought, great. Got in touch with the producer. Producer said, would you like to direct this? And I said, well, yes, but I've never actually directed a movie before, apart from a 7-minute short in 1991. He said, great, you've got the passion, let's go. Since 2018, we've had a number of pitfalls, I must admit. The project hasn't actually made it to the screen yet, but Gandhi took 20 years for Richard Attenborough, and if Richard Attenborough takes 20 years to get a movie made, I've probably got 50, haven't I? I haven't got 50 years left, so hopefully it'll be less than 50.
So this is a project very close to both of our hearts.
Yes, it is a project very close to both our hearts, Jim. I met you in 2018.
We did, yeah, going to a premiere of the Spitfire film.
Correct.
We sat and had a glass of champagne.
And that film was produced by, at the time, one of our producers. That person is no longer on the project. But yes, we were on a bit of a high.
So it is very close to our hearts.
Yeah.
James Holland, good friend of both of ours.
Yeah, top chap.
I'm involved because I'm very passionate about the story. I think it's a great book. If you haven't read it, it's called A Parasail with Wings. If you are watching this by chance, and I'm just putting it out there, if you've got £1 million and you fancy putting it into film, right, it's a bit risky, but don't worry, we've got this great director, right? We're here for you. I'm not actually allowed to say that because we're not allowed to raise money on a public forum like that. But if you just happen to want to donate it, whatever, we're there. Or somebody who likes donating money to films. We'll
am I allowed to raise
it.
money on the public forum?
No,
I could do a Bob
no
Geldof
one
moment.
is, actually.
I could do a Bob Geldof moment.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much,
Jim,
for your time.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of waffling there.
Don't be silly, it's been awesome. And remember, if you like this, it really helps us if you can hit subscribe, bloop the like button, and do all those great things so that we know that you've enjoyed this and you've watched it, and we'll make more. So thanks very much. Thanks, team.